Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm hanging out with Kyle. I should have definitely asked how to pronounce your last name before we got started. Ouellette?
It's pronounced wallet. It's like a fancy wallet or an omelet without the M.
Okay. Ouellette. Kyle Ouellette.
Yes.
At DM Guru 2 over on TikTok. And also other places as well. But mainly, that's your main place right now is over on TikTok.
Yeah, that's sort of where I've sort of launched my dungeon master cred, I guess, on the internet. Yeah. And it's been really, really fun. Like, TikTok was something that I was super reticent to jump onto. But it's been this, really cool, eye-opening experience about this huge population of D&D players that I don't think anybody suspected was there.
Yeah.
We lifted up the Gen Z log and then found a ton of D&D players who have no idea about D&D YouTube from the past, 6 or 7 years. They just don't know about some of the stuff that's happened or the conversations that have been happening.
There are some, really cool things about TikTok and the D&D community.
Yeah.
One of the things is, there is so much more diversity there on TikTok. You have a lot more women and a lot more people of color, and just just this melting pot of people, just on there sharing their love and passion for the hobby with each other.
Yeah, it's
which
incredible.
Is really cool.
And it's so easy to sort of build this I feel like I have this larger D&D community on TikTok, which is sort of if I'm at the sort of the low end of influencers on TikTok for D&D at 1,000, where you start doing live shows and whatever, and then you have people like Brooklyn Tuesday or I Want That Mini DM who have tens of thousands of followers. I think there might be one D&D person who's in the 100Ks, and I think they might be I think a lot of that is migrating between Twitch streaming, and they sort of feed each other, which is this whole thing I'm discovering about social media, because I was trying to back off of it, and then my friend was like, hey, go on TikTok and do D&D stuff, and I was like, well, I do hate my job, so I do have a lot of spare time, and I just love D&D more than anything. When people talk about what's your favorite tabletop game outside of D&D, I'm like, I don't know, D&D is it's not even just my favorite hobby. This is 40% of my personality in my life. My parents know more about D&D than a lot of people on TikTok, just by osmosis, because I haven't stopped talking about it or drawing
whether they want to or not. That's what I'm reading between the lines here.
Exactly. And it all is made worse because I'm a twin, and my twin brother and I are best friends, and we've been basically playing D&D off and on nonstop since we were 11, and I'm gonna be 30. And wow, TikTok has made me abundantly aware of how old that is now.
Yeah. Is your brother also on TikTok?
He is, but he is a lurker. He is super lurker. I was much more, as reticent as we both might have been to get on, I was more willing to jump on the bandwagon, because he had also sort of done his own YouTube thing and had his moment where he was doing stuff and had a big following. And it's exhausting.
Now I'm am I really talking to Kyle, or am I talking to
that's the thing. I mean, you have no idea, except he's rocking his, I think our whole family is almost vaccinated now, which is very exciting. But he's been rocking this COVID Gandalf. He actually looks more like Radagast, to be perfectly honest, because it's all dark. He's just this woolly mammoth person, and he is just he's my original dungeon master, because he was the forever DM for so long. I just benefited off of his obsession with learning every rule in 3rd edition.
Nice.
And just in time, 4th edition came out, and that's what we played all through college, which I love. Whenever people rag on 4th edition, I'm like, look, combat took a long time, but 4th edition is actually the version of D&D that I think everybody wants right now. If I could go back in time with some sort of reality warping spaceship, I would just rearrange them, because I think 5th edition is to me, probably always going to be my favorite edition. It seems like a great culmination of features from the original game that once you pick up the original AD&D Player's Handbook, you get such a deep appreciation for how much stuff has maintained. The tradition of D&D is this really cool thing that I think once people become beyond just fans of the tabletop games, but they become a fan of D&D, it's usually because they tap into the history. I got a box set of the cartoon from the 80s, and I love that, and nobody can convince me that Venger is not the greatest villain of any D&D anything ever. If he's not in Joe Manganiello's D&D movie, Although if he goes with Archon, if he just makes this movie to basically make Archon the movie,
Wait a minute, is Joe Manganiello making a D&D movie?
He's like producing it. He's associated with it.
Oh, okay. I didn't see his name on the list.
I mean, that's the word down the grapevine here in New Hampshire, which is pretty barren.
Yeah, like I saw Chris Pratt and some other people, and I was like, oh, they're getting real actors this time around.
I hope it's good. I unironically love the Dungeons and Dragons Wrath of the Dragon God movie because it's so goofy, but it's absolutely D&D. Yeah. And it's so funny. So I like when the movie rental place was closing in my hometown, I like rode my bike over and like bought it. I was like, give me that DVD. You're not getting rid of that. And I still watch it at least twice a year, and it's always worth it. I think I usually watch it on like Gary Gygax's birthday.
How many movies did they do? I know they did
they did two. I think they did one cinematic one with Jeremy Irons, and that just did so bad that
it was just
the next
terrible.
two, like the Wrath of the Dragon God, was direct to DVD, but I actually still think it's better than the first one. And then they did a third one about the Book of Vile Darkness, and it was bad because it was like, imagine the worst edgelord bad guy D&D party story you've ever heard, and then imagine a bunch of really bad actors trying to cosplay it, and only half of them can read the script. It's just so off.
That was the guy with like the purple lipstick, right?
No, that was I think that was Damodar from the first two. Because he had that weird purple lipstick in the first movie, and it was like, is that? I mean, that's a look. It's a good. I mean, it is a look. And he had such a cool name. He was a great villain, just because his name was like Bruce Payne. It was like really badass. But yeah, I hope it's good. I mean, I certainly don't hope it's bad.
Yeah, I hope it's good too. I don't know. It's weird. Like I have weird thoughts on a D&D movie, which I've talked about on these a lot. But I just like, and again too, like it's always like, well, what is the objective to doing this D&D movie, right? Is it to make a blockbuster movie? Is it to promote the hobby? Like, because all these are different things, right? And to me, like, a really successful D&D movie probably just looks like a fantasy movie that won't do anything for the hobby.
And it'll be the Transformers of D&D. And it's just going to be built to sell stuff. Probably. Like, I mean, that's me being really cynical. Like, some movies have gotten generally better, I think, trending over the past, like, 5 years in terms of, like, nerd culture movies. Like, the Marvel movies have always been pretty good, but, like, everybody is noticing the sharp spike in quality that is always going up. And I think my hope is that some of that will rub over into D&D.
I think it always directly correlates to dollars and cents, because they're like, oh, wait a minute, you can make a lot of money over here, and then they're the impetus to spend more to get a better product, gets out there.
My cat is trying to eat my green screen in some sort of protest.
Yeah, that's a very cat thing to do.
It sure is.
Also, your cat is probably just annoyed because you are on the internet and it is not right now. And all cats know the internet was made for them. Well,
Zoe, you're welcome to hop up on here and talk about D&D. No? Okay, well, so much
no.
It's this language barrier that we've been trying to get through. It's been like a 5-year process.
I don't think that's it at all. That cat knows exactly what you said, and it just says, you want me to do it? I'm not doing that.
That's very, very possible.
Cats just do it. They just do the opposite of what you want.
Yeah. Or anytime, like, oh man, the whole process of writing this adventure has been so time consuming. And like when she'll be like, oh, I want to like hang out with you and hop up on your lap. And I'm like, yeah, cool. But then I'm typing and she's like, no, I need your hands though. You can't sit here and do something. And then I just I'm like, but she keeps me company. She gives me good advice. She gives me good advice on encounter design.
And as always, folks, a quick reminder: there are links in the description.
Oh yeah, to people who have to people who have just shown up.
You've been on TikTok for a little while now.
Yeah.
And also you've written like your first adventure that you've put up on the DMs Guild.
Yeah, this first adventure is something that I wanted to give to the community because I noticed that people on TikTok, what's cool about it is how close it is, like the next evolution of like if Twitch and Twitter had a baby, it would be TikTok, because it's this very quick, immediate, intimate communication with a creator that you like and you. And it's hard there's very little in between. Like you mentioned that the messaging is weird. And
Yeah.
it's because it's so direct and it's so easy. All you have to do is be a mutual, and sometimes based on people's privacy settings, that's not even enough and to like block and you just message each other.
Yeah.
So like it's weird, and I found that people tend to be a little off put when I just sort of like, if I like their stuff and then we become friends, I message them like I would, if we were at a con and they were like, hey, we're friends now. I'd be like, cool. I don't want to tell you about why I think you're cool. Which I think is off-putting to some people because most of us reasonably were raised not to trust people on the internet, which is why we trust them with,
And also too, like sometimes we just want to broadcast. And it gets weird when people look at us. We're like, no, don't look at me.
Let me open up. I want to have that YouTube link open because I realize I've not been looking at chat.
Oh, the chat, yeah. Michael, thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate it.
Mike!
So, how, like, you mentioned, like, you were looking to do some kind of content creation, and a friend of yours kind of pushed you towards TikTok.
Yeah, I've sort of been trying to find an opportunity to take, over a decade of just basically nonstop D&D experience, mostly as a player, but then as, I've played for basically 6 years with DMing here and there, but I was really bad at it because I'm like my prep is really loose. I never like nailed down my thoughts, and that became super apparent to me in writing this adventure. So I have but I have this interesting. I think what I have is an interesting perspective that my brother doesn't have because he is the best dungeon master on the planet, and nobody can really convince me otherwise. And I'm fine saying that. And so he is just this. Whatever I know, he has known longer than I have, and so. He is someone I looked up to, that I still look up to as a dungeon master, and I wanted to create something to sort of be like, hey, this is like my take on this classic idea of a starting adventure. And I noticed that people on TikTok, as they get towards like 1,000 followers, do giveaways, and they generally very generously just buy you D&D stuff. I won a box of minis and the collector's edition of Van Richten's just by communicating with people on TikTok, and it's amazing. And I was like, well, that's really cool, but I've been wanting to do, this D&D content creation is going really well. People seem to really like what I'm saying. I'm not getting a lot of trolls or hate, there except for one guy, but it was all funny. And then I'm sort of getting close to 1,000. I'm like, well, I could buy people stuff, or I could use this as an opportunity to sit down and finish the adventure I've sort of been building for years in an attempt to recapture that experience I had when I was in high school and I first played The Keep on the Borderlands.
What is the name of the adventure?
The name of the adventure is Shadows Under a Mestral, and it is a pulp fantasy action sort of like mystery where you, similar to like the Cult of the Reptile God, people in this woodland medieval town have been going missing and nobody knows what's going on, and the Baron has been poisoned and his daughter's been kidnapped, and there's this cult that worships a snake god, and they are like, infiltrated the city and are preparing some dark ritual to create some, horrible thing. And
it sounds like a terrible place to visit or live.
Exactly, unless you're adventurers. And so what I basically set out to do was just create like the adventure that I wish I had, where like the starter set was my first go at really running a campaign. And I love Lost Mines of Phandelver, and I really appreciated how by the end of it, it had kind of taught me about pacing and how to challenge your players and arcs and curves of interest. And like just dungeon design. I think the Wave Echo Cave is great. Like I'll never forget the first time I ran players and they saw the spectator and they just thought it was a beholder because they had just, that's what they assumed it was because by all rights it is. And I was like, man, this adventure totally rocks. Like our wizard Baron had really high stats, and he was the last person fighting the last bugbear in the last boss battle, and he had no spell slots, and he was like, you know what? I'm just going to beat this bugbear to death or I'm going to die. And the wizard totally beat up this bugbear to death and then, help pick everybody back up. So I wanted to create, this adventure that captured some of the more straightforward and I think useful elements of AD&D adventures, where it kind of tells you all this just useful information and doesn't bog you down in all this like lore. Yeah. I still have lore, but I wanted to sort of put notes from me as a designer in the book, because something that I really appreciate from like Lawrence Schick in White Plume Mountain is that sort of authorial voice where like he talks to you sort of as the DM running the game, and it's best exemplified in the two Ifrit that like at the end of this adventure, if your players have had an easy time of it, throw these two fire genies at them and chances are they'll die. and it's just like this outrageously, it's just too, like, the adventure is, you know, meant for, I think, like 4th level characters,
Yeah.
and these two, if free, will smoke them unless they've gotten like Black Razor and Wave and Whelm and everybody else down here, and it's just hilarious. But like it says in the text, if your players have had a really tough time, just don't even bother. And I think that's useful. And I wish more adventures, you know, felt like, you know, Mike Merle's adventures do this a lot, like in 4th edition. He has a really playful authorial voice, and I wanted to make my authorial voice somewhat instructional and entertaining, because I hate, as a visual person, reading a D&D anything and just have it be the most boring handbook ever. I think, you know, for whatever people do gripe about 5th edition, I do think it would be nice to have a little bit more flair and have it be more interesting to read. That being said, the lore for all the monsters in the monster manual never ceases to entertain me. I'll go back and just read the monster manual for fun, because I always find this like little tidbit of lore that I'm like, I totally forgot about that.
This edition has the best lore for monsters.
It's so cool. What they did is like really made it relevant to like quests. Like the one I always think of is in the Centaur block, where it just talks about like, oh yeah, Centaur migration herds can sometimes take, you know, decades to come back to the same place, or centuries, and in that time a small village might have popped up, and that could spark a conflict. And I'm like, that's just a cool idea for a plot, and I never would have thought of that.
Yeah,
and it's so cool.
Yeah, you know, they also they really went out of their way to take monsters from AD&D that were just fun and cool, but made zero sense, and usually end it with, we think a crazy wizard did it, right? And like make like consistent, solid lore around those monsters, or like a little bit of re-envisioning. Like the Nightmare is one of my favorites now. You know how all nightmares are spawned from Pegasus that are basically like tortured and tormented into being, you know, these evil fiends.
What I like about stuff like that is I think when people tend to lean on like logic to explain magic, like the Transmuter Wizard in my regular gaming group, he loves to sort of like take spells and be like, and if this is true, then that means this is true, which means if I cast this spell at this, you know, slot with this magic item, and it becomes this insane rabbit chase of logic and math and like magic.
I just hope there's a string board involved with that somewheres.
Well, we do have a whiteboard because we play at the office.
Yeah.
Or we did. We've been playing remotely for forever, but
that's a mood.
Yeah, I've actually taken. It's been great for me because I've run a lot more D&D than I was before. Because before, our weekly game that my brother ran for us at the office was like the only D&D I had time for, because like planning stuff. Our group is like 11th level now, and we're basically the Avengers of our local area. And so like the stuff we're dealing with is so insane that it tends to take a lot of my free time to figure out how I'm going to deal with it. So with online gaming, my brother was like, dude, he has like this expansive minis collection that he really should get insured, because if anything ever happened, he would just be like, I don't know how to recover from this, and I'm basically just gonna like give up.
Done. I'm just gonna crawl.
I'm just like, I can't replace that. But anyway, so he's all of his setup. Part of what makes him such a great DM is the whole experience at the table. And I don't have all those minis, and I don't spend the insane amount of time he does on maps. So for me, on the internet, I got to finish my Curse of Strahd campaign, which had taken like 3 years because we all live all over the East Coast. Pardon me, it's very hot here because the planet is burning.
Yeah, I mean, already, like, you know, the last like 3 or 4 days, it's been 90 and above. Like, we like to take our dog down the street to my in-laws because they have a fenced-in yard, and the last couple times she doesn't even run; she just lays in the shade. Because it's
my cat just like finds new places to lie down and can then complain to me about how hot it is. What were we talking about before?
We had a question here if you want to tackle it.
This is from Aaron Burmeister. I know him.
Yeah, what are some differences and similarities between your adventure and published D&D adventures? What do you think published D&D adventures get right, and what do you think needs work?
Well, that is a great multi-layered question, so let's just run down it. Differences and similarities between my adventure and published D&D adventures, and I'll just use 5th edition as the model because that's what most people are referencing, is my adventure sort of in some respects, the similarities are in a lot of identifiable motifs, like the pages all sort of have that yellowed look that 5th edition is sort of taking a little bit of a softer take on third.
Yeah.
And so it looks recognizably 5th edition with some sketchy artwork and some more finished pieces. It's got the similar layout with like similar reds and colors that people can identify. And the basic structure of like, you know, encounters and stuff is recognizable. Where it's different largely is the way I organize my information and format it with DM notes and the way I describe things to be more like tools for the DM to use and less of like a handbook that just tells you about a thing. You know, I write, you know, really long, well-written, I think. I take time to write thoughtful dialogue for the DM because not everybody's good at writing pre-written dialogue. It's a skill you have to work at for a long time. And I spent, you know, almost 9 months writing for just automotive stuff. And then when I finally got a chance to write this, I was like, okay, it's time to go to work. And I really, you know, I wanted to give people stuff that's fun and evocative to say, because something that I wanted to put in this adventure that I don't think I've seen really anybody do, except for maybe, you know, Baker with Eberron, is try to put some of that like Conan pulp, you know, grit and fast-paced action and like fabulous descriptions that have really low word count, but really are evocative. And they get you with cool words that you're not used to seeing. So I wanted to bring some of that. So I wanted to, because I love Conan, and I know for a fact that Gary Gygax, I don't know any other Gary, loved Conan even more than Lord of the Rings. So it's one of my biggest inspirations for like dungeons in particular. And so a lot of the dialogue I wrote is sort of evocative of that language. And then what do you think published D&D adventures get right? What do you think needs work? I think what they get right is so far their consistency with really high quality stuff has been incredible. And I think like their maps, their production quality is great. And I like sort of their modern takes on classic adventures. You know, Tyranny of Dragons to me is cool as like sort of this world tour faction grab. I think it's sort of a modern, weaker version of the Red Hand of Doom from 3rd edition. But then like, you know, Storm King's Thunder is a cool riff on, you know, Against the Giants. And Descended to Avernus is one of the coolest stories I've ever heard of. And like they're just like going in really crazy places. And Curse of Strahd is one of my favorite adventures ever. So what they're doing really well is these like evocative genre evoking, you know, games that really teach you about doing like horror as a genre. I learned doing Curse of Strahd. Or if you want to do pulp action, you know, always escalating, you know, adventures like Eberron helped me flex my Conan muscles because I had like tables so that as soon as things feel like they're doing well, you have things go bad, because that's sort of like the pattern of like Conan. As soon as Indiana Jones has the handle of the situation, some new problem.
Well, I think that's also
up.
like a big trope in noir, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like, oh, everything is good, we got this, and then
pulp action and noir are so good together because that like sort of mysterious detective aspect is sort of in those bones. And then what I think needs work, I sort of mentioned before, I really like it when adventures are more modular and shorter. I really love the big stuff, but like I have like every adventure they've ever published from Wizards of the Coast, and I've run like 1.5 of them.
Yeah.
Like, I dream about running Tomb of Annihilation, but like that's a huge undertaking. I have to read. Hey man, I don't want to read the whole thing, but it's a lot, and I much prefer, based on my DM style, I collect the old AD&D adventures or 2nd edition adventures, and I just translate them to like modern stuff because like I just think they're cool, and the way they're set up is just different, and people don't expect it. Because 5th edition sort of has like a formula you can follow, and AD&D like totally catches people off guard, and you sort of have to translate it because obviously those adventures were written more for like get all this treasure and magic items with no context why, and then your job as the DM is to, you know, make that interesting. So that's a great question, Aaron.
Yeah, I would say like I like the scope that Wizards is able to handle with each adventure, where it's a new aspect of the game that they decide to focus in on and build the adventure around it. Like that's really great. But like you said, like the thing that I don't like is they're too long, and they're releasing one or more of these books a year, and no one can go through them all.
Yeah,
you know, so like the anthology adventure books, like you know, Tales from the Yawning Portal and Ghost of Saltmarsh, to me seem to make a lot more sense because then you can use at least pieces of it, right? I mean, that being said, like our group doesn't use any official content when it comes to adventures. I mean, it was only this year that I finally played through an official adventure run by somebody else, and it was Curse of Strahd. We like literally just finished that game up.
I love that Curse of Strahd is making a comeback. I love
Yeah.
it so much. I want that revamped box so bad.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
Well,
for $100, it could be yours.
That's true. I'm kind of banking on just putting it on my like Christmas wish list. Yeah, I think what I would love for them to do one of two things, which is if you're gonna do this high quality thing, that like Strahd level of revamp box, do one box set like that a year and just give us all this great stuff, or take Storm King's Thunder and release like 3 episodic chunks of it.
The way they used to do, yeah.
Yeah, because then you can fill in the gaps, and then I can like, it's so easy to take any of those individual pieces out. Like I got, for Christmas, my brother got me the triptych of the Tomb of the Barrow of the Forgotten King, which influenced my adventure a lot because I thought it was great. And then it's a UNT adventure that spreads into the Sinister Spire, which is like a small Underdark adventure, and then ends with the Temple of the UNT, and this is all for 3rd edition. And it's this really cool triptych that you can sort of do this like Doctor Who style adventure that ends in storming this, fortress run by this, cult of the UNT. And as an avid fan of Conan, I love using serpent cults because they're so easy, and there's so much great, imagery from that 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger movie with the cult of Set. And that was a huge inspiration on this. Hold on, I got my twin brother is a plant in chat, and I don't mind that at all. Hi, Brandon. What are the opportunities you see? And do you want to read it? I feel like I'm stepping on your toes.
No, it's fine. I'm enjoying.
I kind of want you to, if I'm being perfect.
I'll definitely read it. But I feel like since we started, it's like you're one of those cars that you just like pull back and let go.
Dude, I've been trying really hard to ease up on that because I will. And when I'm talking about D&D, my brother and I basically will compete to see who can talk the fastest. And
oh my God, your poor parents.
Well, they're so used to it. We keep it interesting because we do tons of voices. Like we've been pretending to be cartoons probably since before we could speak.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron.
I enjoy having some people on that are very passionate about what we're talking about. So what are the opportunities you see for TikTok, for D&D community over other social media outlets? And it's actually a really great question.
That is a really great question. Way to go, Brandon. So I think what I'm seeing right now is like with TikTok, right now YouTube and Twitch are super oversaturated, right? Like I can't walk down the street without finding some new D&D podcast, Twitch stream, live campaign, Curse of Strahd, charity stream, or YouTube channel talking about D&D, and it's everywhere. It's amazing, but it's hard to cut through and find new stuff, and it's hard to gain new traction. But TikTok seems like a great opportunity for people who want to make D&D content and have a lot more, I think, direct control and contact with your audience, and being able to see like all the analytics on TikTok are so open and easy to access, and they're so understandable that it's easy to figure out, okay, people generally watch these videos like half, they don't even watch half of it. So I need to make shorter videos. Yeah. Or people really like this topic, so I'm going to do a series on it. Trying to figure out who are the big fish on TikTok, and it's super easy because you can duet and stitch with anybody if they put the things, and that all drives traction. So I think it's a great opportunity and we're seeing it with like, some of these people. One of my friends, if Plot Doctor from TikTok is watching this, hi Doc. Doc is this plot doctor is this guy on TikTok who just comes up with the most tear-wrenching, dramatic plot twists, or just plots in general, just story beats to fit in a D&D campaign. And what's so good about them is like they're so easy to fit in, and they actually are quite moving. He is very, very good. And I watched the Doctor go up from like just a few thousand, and then he hit 10K, and then like the Kool-Aid Man, he burst through 20K like it was made out of wet tissue paper. And I'm like, go to the moon, dude, because like once you start, and it's incredible. It's a great opportunity for, if you feel like you have something to bring to the larger D&D community, which we just found out was way bigger, then there's no reason you can't pick up your phone and just start recording. Because some of the people who have tons of views, they don't do all the green screen stuff. I'd spend a lot of time photographing my books and doing like themed backgrounds or series or writing up lists of stuff and making sure the music is balanced correctly, that I'm consistent with all this stuff and doing it as like, I basically think of it as I run a D&D show, which I'm hoping will draw people to my adventure design. And then if Matt Colville or James Andrew-Casso, if you see this, I will take my adventure and print it just to mop the floors at MCDM. So that's me taking my shot. James, if you're watching this, I just want to talk to you and Matt and do something for Arcadia.
Yeah.
Call me.
I know a guy.
That would be incredible. That's James, my dream come true.
So James is a friend of mine. I had him on one of the live chats like early on, and we're talking, and I'm like, wait a minute. One of us said something, and we're like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, and it turns out like we live like 3 towns away from each other.
No way.
And then in South Jersey, like that's not even like a real distance, right?
Well, hey, next time I'm down in Philly, I'll print this adventure and I'll run it for you guys.
Are you gonna be at PAX Unplugged?
I try to be at PAX Unplugged whenever I can, and if this adventure does well, I'm definitely planning. If this adventure gets any traction, and it seems like there's a want for this style of adventure, I have every intention of doing a like more cleaned up definitive edition with like full art through the whole thing and like really making it a product that I'm willing to like charge people money for. Because something that is different about this adventure is it is totally free. It is 100% free. I want anybody, there's no reason you can't either go to my Patreon or go to my DM's Guild link and just download it for free, because, you know, you'll find at least one thing. If you can't find at least one thing that you absolutely love in this adventure, I'll give you your money back. Which of course was nothing. So you at least have a free adventure. And it comes with cool art. It's got art that me and my friends made, and it's I think it's funny. I think something that I do really love is the idea of Funhouse Dungeons, because something that I like in the old adventures is that willingness to be silly.
Yeah. Like
D&D is so epic now. It's so cinematic, which I love. Like, I think if anything, if they want to do D&D movies, either do Dragonlance or just do the movies of the adventures that Wizards would have released in order. Like, do Tyranny of Dragons, the movie, and get Lena Headey to voice Tiamat, because we all deserve that. Or, you know, Emilia Clarke. The Queen of Dragons gets to be Tiamat, and and tickets sell themselves. And then do Tomb of Annihilation and get Mark Hamill to be a Sararak, because we all deserve that after COVID.
That would be
that would just be cool. And then they can do that thing. Remember in 3rd edition when we had like Tordek and
the iconic characters,
Lydia. You see? So that's something that I did for this adventure, because I think it's cool, because I felt a really close bond to them. Just reading those books over and over again, I know all those guys.
There used to be a YouTube channel, and I can't remember the name of it now, but like they would do all the different characters from that and do like skits and bits.
I think it's great. I love those guys, and I wanted to do that. So I took the very earliest version of this adventure as my own homebrew was an adventure that is sort of going to become my mega dungeon, because eventually I'd like to release the sequel to this adventure. Is called like Assault on the Necropolis of Despair, or just the Necropolis of Despair, and it's like a mid-level adventure that is just a mega dungeon of UNT nonsense in the swamp where you have to fight a serpent demigod. And then after that, I'd like to work on my mega dungeon, which is called Sword Hill. And I bring up Sword Hill because it's this mega dungeon buried underneath this massive sword that's just stabbed into the countryside, and nobody knows where it comes from, but there's this maze. And the characters that first played that playtest were my brother and my 2 coworkers, and I took their character concepts and then made them the iconic characters of this adventure. And what was really fun was assembling briefs for the artists, because all the artists who did anything with the characters had to be briefed so they were all consistent. And that was really fun world building, because I got to sort of come up with like, okay, Caius the wizard is, you know, like, I think he's a necromancer and he's got this withered arm. So like, you know, there's this art of this wizard with this skeletal arm and absolutely no context whatsoever.
You don't need context. Who needs that? It was D&D PSA videos. That was exactly it. Thank you, Shallander. You know, I want to circle back to Brandon's question, because I think you were beginning to touch on it. Yeah. And then I sidetracked you.
Well, that's super easy, so I don't blame you at all.
So, you know, to me, the true beauty of TikTok over other forms of social media is just accessibility, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, everyone pretty much has one of these, and like that's
Oh
all
no,
you
the
need.
Diablo fans are gonna come after us now.
So
Uh,
if you have a
yeah,
phone, you can be a TikToker,
that's
and
true.
so the bar is really low to entry. I feel like, and also too, like the way TikTok works. Like, I don't know how other people use it, but
Yeah.
basically, when I take my dog out,
Yes,
for their
that's
walks,
true.
I'm just watching
Yeah.
TikToks on my For You page. I don't know who anybody is, like by their name most of the time.
Yeah.
I know their faces. As I bring more people on here, it's to kind of like expose our audience to more TikTokers.
Yeah.
I'm meeting more people and learning names and remembering names, but I have an amoeba brain anyway. So, uh,
Yeah, I think to
to
your
me,
point about
that's
it.
like the
Yeah.
beauty, the
Yeah.
accessibility.
I think it's true because when back in the elder days, when I was a younger man, I tried helping my friends and my brother launch a YouTube channel called the Geek XP, and it was based off of his. He just started doing like reaction videos to like anime and cartoons, and then he started doing D&D stuff, and we wanted to do that. But the production quality and making high quality videos for tons of stuff and trying to make sure that you're always making stuff and it's always good was a huge time sink, and it really was hard. And then you'd spend like a weekend doing like a video that you're really proud of, and then
Yeah.
it might get traction. Or I stayed up all night one night just editing a Soul Calibur like anime intro thing because I just wanted to, and it's been seen like 100 times. And I made that like 2 years ago. But on TikTok, I can spend 30 minutes, record 11 videos, and just post them all weekend. And
Mhm.
then one of them might go viral, and I might get some people. One guy, Dungeons and Dinner on TikTok, recently had one of his videos, and he does these cool like campaign ideas that just are really imaginative. And he just like one of his videos hit like over 300,000 views, like that. And all of a sudden, you're a star, kid. And then all of a sudden, people just want to subscribe. And it's one of those things, like, much like every other form of capitalism. The better you do, the better you keep doing.
Yeah, I mean, even non-monetary, like the part of doing creating any content, right? Like when you do it and it seems like nobody cares, and
It's
like
rough.
it's rough. It has an effect, and one of the things I would say is like don't do things unless you enjoy doing them, because you're gonna have to deal with that. And like the first 6 months for us, it was crickets. Like nobody was watching our videos,
It's
and
tough.
then we just had a lucky break.
Yeah, and that's all it takes. Like, I don't remember my first video that really got a lot of traction, which got like 3,500 views, was a video talking about arcane like war crimes. There was
Yeah.
a trend where people were talking about how to use spells as arcane war crimes, like what is just like the worst thing you could do with these spells. And I talked about how like the D&D game I play in, that I have been for like 3 or 4 years fairly consistently. We were in like an arena fight in this dwarven citadel with these giant mechanical scorpions, and the transmuter wizard teamed up with our light cleric to basically trap one of the scorpions in a wall of force that was a dome, and we
Yeah.
put a wall of fire on the inside, and it just broiled
Cooked
until
it,
it
yeah.
was cooked. And then we all sort of looked at each other like, yeah, we can never do that to anybody with a nervous system. And people really thought that was funny, but I'm like, I'm not going to do videos just about that,
Well, that's literally just the druid casting heat metal on anybody.
which is classic. That is
Yeah.
classic. My little brother did that against the Minotaur in the Caves of Chaos, and
Yeah.
I'll never forget it.
That's brutal. So Shalander wants to know what's your favorite TSR module.
Ugh, that is so hard. I think it's the Lost Caverns of Sojkan, and that might just be because I like saying it so much.
Yeah.
I like, even though I think the reason why it's my favorite is because it has this weird gallery of bizarre monsters, because it was basically just a maze filled with everything they wanted to put in the Fiend Folio. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of cool stuff in there, and the whole setup of just this empty wizard's tomb of Igwilv, and like her vampiric daughter is buried down here, and like you just have to go down here and get this thing for this king. And the reason why I like it so much is A, it's just filled with lots of cool monsters, and then B, the whole way you get to the dungeon is this really well done wilderness exploration thing through this cool canyon. And like some of the random encounters you're going to encounter in the canyon for Sojkan are like, there's just a blue dragon here, or 50 hobgoblins. And I absolutely love stuff like that. Like you never see stuff like that in modern D&D. And I think it's
Yeah.
just because like everyone's aware of game design and the action economy, but I really like that realism of there's a, battalion of hobgoblin soldiers marching through this area.
Third edition, man. Third edition.
Third edition was awesome. That was sort of where I cut my teeth.
But that's also why you don't see that stuff anymore, because third edition was all about here's how you build the appropriate encounter for the appropriate level of the party, and like in AD&D it didn't matter. Like your first level, here's Tiamat. Deal with it.
Yeah, have fun. And you can't, like, people take for granted how much stuff 5th edition gives you. Like, one thing that I'm not super crazy about is this obsession with just an infinite number of subclasses. Because I think the power creep is too real. And when people, like, there's just so much in the player's handbook that I think needs to be appreciated before you go off being like, I want to, why isn't there a subclass for this why can't I be a chess-based monk subclass? And I'm like, that is so specific. Are you sure you don't just want to punch stuff or be a wizard? But in those old adventures, you just had fewer things, like, which I think drove a lot of great creativity, right? Because
early editions challenged the players.
Yeah.
Modern games challenge the characters.
Which is cool, and I think maybe part of the reason D&D is having such a powerful resurgence is how easy it is to hook people with that. Because when you because a lot of people come up with video games, and most video games give you the tools you need to deal with the problem in front of you, and it's considered fair. The challenge is using them properly. And then in older games, it was more like Super Nintendo games, where it's like, this game is just objectively hard. We've given you 3 things to deal with it, and at a certain point, you just have to be really good because there's no way for you to just tough this out. Like when your fighter caps out at 11th level, and you have a keep, but you can't gain like more stuff, and the wizard is casting time stop, it makes the world feel really real. And I like stuff like that, so I tried putting a little bit pinches of that stuff in the game. Maybe not in terms of like, I do want to challenge players a little bit, especially when it comes to puzzles, because I think puzzles and traps can be hard to learn how to do as a DM. If all they come down to is just a roll, it's kind of boring. Like you could just do a fight if you just wanted to do a roll. But like having puzzles that require the players just to think a little bit, they like that. Like having props, they really dig that. And I love doing that to sort of get them engaged, especially with tactile stuff. As a visual person, I love if someone's like trying to describe this puzzle door in the Tomb of Horrors, it's just like, wait, how many lights are there? The mist is coming out of the portal or the mist is in the portal? It's so noodly. The first time I ran that, I was like, Gary, this is cold, man. This is the most
also like
thing.
The interesting thing about early editions of the game, right? Especially like the designers are very sadistic in the sense that like they were going to design like a death trap for you, but it wasn't enough for them to just make a death trap. They made you work to figure out how to access the death trap. Because you're thinking, well, if it's this hard to figure out, there's going to be something really cool here. No, it's not. It's a sphere of annihilation. You're dead.
It's just pain. And to me, that is sort of like, when I think about how smart a lich should be or a beholder, I think it should be at least 50% of that capricious sort of like, I'm just going to trick you. Because they're super smart, and the players sort of have to think outside of their normal operations. And then I saw there was something down here. Someone said something about AD&D, you play normal people becoming a hero. In 5th edition, you play a hero becoming a superhero. Shallandor, that's a pretty good point. I think, yeah.
I'm okay with that, though, too, because I prefer, like, pulp action, cinematic. Like, I hate realism. I hate gritty realism. Like,
I think it's a little overblown, maybe. It's sort of like people chase this thing, and like the Witcher tabletop is about as gritty realistic as I'll get, because it has like every weapon is super specific, which I love. Like, if I don't really like mess around with Pathfinder that much, but I do really love their inventory section because it's just enough crunch to make them all feel special.
I don't want to spend all my time making new characters because the game was so realistic, right? Like, the best example is, like, I may get my nerd card revoked, but, like, the first novels I really read were The Hobbit and Tolkien. I don't like them now. Like
Really?
they're really well written, they're good
Uh-huh.
stories, but they're slow and boring to me. And really, like, no, I want to see Dritz do Erden cut everything apart. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, oh no, there's a bad guy. What should we do? We run. Like that. Like,
Right.
if the movies were written the way the books were, it would just be them running away from everything.
Right. Yeah,
That's not exciting.
I totally get that. Lord of the Rings, I read The Hobbit as a kid and I loved it. And then when I tried reading Lord of the Rings, I think I was just too young and my attention span was too short because I bounced off it. I am only just now, I might get my nerd card revoked. I'm only just now actually sitting down and reading cover to cover The Fellowship of the Ring and then the rest of them. I've never done it. I've watched the movies like a billion times. But reading the books, it's been interesting because in high school, while my brother was reading The Lord of the Rings, I was reading Conan. So I totally love, like, reading Conan in a weekend is like one of my favorite pastimes because it's so punchy and the chapters are so short. And I will say, if you like stuff like that, Dave, you're really going to like this adventure and you should totally download it because it's sort of built on that spirit of like, the combats are all like thrilling and sort of like dangerous, but I don't think any of them, the boss fight in this adventure is the toughest boss fight I've ever built because this is basically my flag in the ground of if I had to make a solo boss monster for 5th edition, this is what he would look like, and he is dangerous.
Yeah.
He just hits a lot. He's one of those bosses that if people go down fighting, like if at least one player doesn't go down fighting King Talash, the World Breaker, then the dice have truly smiled on you because he just hits so often. Marley says, I am a fake nerd boy. Thank you, Marley. Marley is one of my old-time friends, and he is also on TikTok.
Yeah. We also wouldn't have gotten, if the story was true, if the movie was true to the book, we wouldn't have got Legolas doing all the cool shit that he did.
That's true, but that's just awesome.
He was cool in the books, but in the movies he got ratcheted up. We get to see him doing the things where he's like running and climbing all over monsters, and riding a shield, like surfing the shield. I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah, and those become the things that you want to set up if you have an opportunity and you can set that up at the table. You're like, oh man, this is going to be amazing. Yeah. And you do it, and everybody loves it, and it's super fun. So, that cinematic, that super heroic cinematic thing, I think is super useful, and I totally try to capture that cinematic energy at the table. But then what I typically do is I will bring my players down to mortal levels closer to AD&D, and I found the simplest way to do that with 5th edition is just limiting their starting equipment. I did a TikTok about this homebrew has never failed me. It's great, and it is... You go to the page chapter 5, page 142, maybe. I don't know. That's totally off the top of my head.
And you make them roll their gold.
And you make them roll their gold, and then you cut that gold in half. And that's their starting equipment. They have nothing else but what they buy with that. And the reason that works is because they'll never have enough resources, unless they're a noble, to have a really great starting kit. Because if you take the starting gear, it's pretty generic, but it's pretty good. That 1 to 2nd level, time is pretty breezy. If you have a shield and chainmail and a longsword, and you're a fighter, and you're like, yeah, these goblins, can't really hit me. They can, but so having the limited budget forces players to make decisions very, very early on, and I think that shopping experience tells them a lot more about their character's past and their limitations and what their style of fighting is, way more than if they just have a la carte to get whatever they want. And then they start thinking about things that I don't think players normally think about, and it's just one of those things being like, you don't have a lot of stuff. And I think, when I was playing AD&D, we had very little money. My fighter didn't start with armor, and I spent all my money on a hunting dog. So all I had was a smithing hammer for a weapon. I didn't even have a shield. I had to take a rusty shield off of a cadaver or something. And it was just rough because I was so squishy. Our wizard had 2 hit points. Brandon drew a doodle of Joran the wizard, totally healthy, and he was very heroic wizard. And then Joran, after losing 1 hit point, and he was this bruised and battered, because he only had 2, and he had no spell slot. So he would try to cast shield once, and then it would fail, and then he would just run around stabbing people with his dagger. But that was fun. So
it was not easy wizarding back in those days.
No, but
so your alter ego that may or may not actually really just be you split into. What's one of the harder aspects of making quality D&D content for TikTok when limited to 60 seconds?
That's a really good question. It's one of those things that it took me a while to teach myself how to be really succinct. The biggest challenge is I have to take obviously I have a lot to say and I love to talk. So this can be a problem when I have at max 60 seconds and I'm really scared of trying 3 minutes because I'll just keep talking. And I don't think anybody's going to watch that long. So the biggest challenge for me is really honing down exactly what I want to say and as effective and as interesting as possible, which is actually really useful because it has helped me sort of whittle down what's useful advice. What is me just talking about myself? What is me just, rambling? Like, I want it to be punchy, just like Conan. I want my advice to be punchy, useful, and relevant. I think I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody on TikTok for D&D, but I think some of my least favorite reactions to like people's questions, like people genuinely being like, hey, I have this problem at my table, or I don't know how to deal with this problem player. And then people will go like, let me help you with your problem by just talking about how cool I am and how great my campaign setting is.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what does that have to do with this player who's trying to coach everybody at the table? And so my only goal is to just try to, as punctually as possible, be like, hey, I see you. Thank you for asking. I have some advice and I hope it's helpful, and just not waste their time. And then treat it like, I try to treat every interaction and question like a real interaction. Like I think people miss an opportunity by just calling people out by name. I think people really love that. You pick your username on TikTok deliberately. Like that is the name people see. So I just kind of take people at face value, and then I will announce their name when I do a reaction, and people have a lot of fun with it because I will do something funny. I'll do something ridiculous and do a funny voice. Like Brooklyn Tuesday is sort of like angling to become like the maleficent arch-villain of D&D TikTok with all of her devious schemes for how to use spells in really brutal ways. And her name is Brooklyn Tuesday on TikTok, and it just sounded like the name of like a really badass D&D pro boxer.
Yeah.
So when I did a stitch of one of her questions, I introduced her as like Brooklyn Tuesday, and it was like fun, and people like that because it catches their attention. And then I do that differently for everybody. So, and I think people just enjoy that. So I think
is she the one with the really thick New York accent?
No, I think she has some kind of British accent, New Zealand accent. Who knows?
Okay, because there's another TikToker who has like this really thick New York accent.
I'll have to keep my eye out for him. I don't know anybody with a really thick New York accent, but yeah, it's really cool. It's challenging, but I will say it's very helpful in terms of it's a skill that you practice, learning how to refine your advice to be useful, relevant, and concise. So that's really the biggest challenge. And then I really challenge myself. Anytime I make a 15-second video, that is me really trying to be as quick as possible, which I hope is helpful.
Do you prefer videos that are informative or entertaining?
Depends. What is his name? There's this really hilarious guy who plays with like the electronic voice modulation, and he just tells hilarious stories. And I absolutely watch TikTokers like that just for pure entertainment. Yeah. For D&D stuff, I find it somewhat distasteful when people try to like tout advice and it's just clickbait. Like when people are like, here's some D&D advice, and then it's like bad advice. They're like, and I'm like, bro, you have 50,000 people following you, and you want to advocate that it's always a good idea to like fake who your character is at the table. And I'm like, that's only ever pissed off people at my table, dude. Like at least give it a caution. This may not always work. So I just try to be as,
like the person that hides their character sheet or makes a fake character
or it's like,
sheet.
yeah, I'm a wizard, but they're actually a warlock. Like, why are you lying? We're supposed to be a team. Like, what do you get out of this?
Yeah,
like, what do you get out of this? I think Critical Role is so entertaining because all those people love playing and acting with each other, and they love that whole reveal thing. And because people like drama and TV shows, the fandom, and I'm totally one of them, I've been a critter since day one. When they did their first video on Geek and Sundry, I was like, I am all about this. Who is this Travis Willingham gentleman? He is quite dashing. And I've never stopped being a fan. I'm like super interested to see whatever they do next, and I can't wait for that animated show. But like the way that they dramatically reveal stuff to each other, I think has created an expectation that that's what good D&D is. It's about having this secret from your backstory that you hold on to as long as possible. And then I'm over here like, well, my barbarian Cruel I made up 5 minutes ago, and the only word he knows how to say is cruel. And that character found 2 magic swords in like 4 sessions. And he had terrible stats, but he couldn't stop winning. I just rolled great.
I think you just described Groot.
He is kind of like Groot, only he's a half-orc. He's like a towering half-orc, but he's also Groot.
Yeah.
But I love ripping off stuff from Marvel for my D&D games all the time. I think I did kind of rip off Groot in Sword Hill because I had like a brood guard who could only say brood. So he would just sort of like lope around just being like, brood. They liked him.
Yeah, sometimes it's fun to play with those tropes.
Yeah,
so
I think it's fun to have fun at the table.
How many games do you have going on currently?
Right, so writing this adventure has been like a full-time job. So right now I am
in addition to your full-time job.
In addition to my full-time job. Yeah. So right now I have games on hold. So I am looking at picking back up Curse of Strahd because I want to run my sort of like homebrew sequel to that. I want to run my OSR game. I want to continue my Eberron campaign that I just finished up because I took the 4th edition adventure, Seekers of the Ashen Crown, which is this sort of like, we have to, collect the pieces of this elven holy grail and stop this evil undead cult from, doing all this bad stuff. And it was awesome. It was so much fun. He did not name Ben Bott. He did not name both swords cruel, but he should have. He should have been like, this is cruel 2 and this is cruel 3. But for the Eberron game, that was super fun. And then, so I have like a bunch of games in the back burner, but what I'm most excited about is I have been DMing almost nonstop since COVID started. So I'm really looking forward to getting to play again as my ranger. Because I have all these magic items and my pet can talk now because our druid casts Awaken. And nice. I have like all these magic items and this like super cool bow. And we have to kill basically the arch lich of my brother's campaign setting in the next 7 levels. I don't know.
Get on that, Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon, we want to play. Emerald Flame forever. Yeah, it's been cool. One last thing. I know we're running out of time, which makes me very sad. I want to just keep talking. Is something else that's cool about D&D TikTok is you just find people very randomly and obscurely, but you find you have things in common in D&D. Like, one of my friends on TikTok, Moogle McFly, for his first adventure he ever ran as a DM was the Sunless Citadel from 3rd edition, which they repurposed in the Yawning Portal. And that was the first adventure for my brother's homebrew campaign. He sort of took the Sunless Citadel and made it his own, and we got to do that. It was like our first dungeon delve, and I almost died like 3 times. And so Moogle McFly and I became friends because I'm like, oh, dude, I know this adventure really well. And I even adapted it for like my Keep on the Shadowfell game. That's a game I really want to play because that has my little brother and my girlfriend in it. And that one's just a blast because they're super... My little brother's been playing since we played AD&D, but my girlfriend is somewhat new and she is like fascinated with puzzles. And then the train of thought just left the station like it was never there.
Fascinated with what?
Fascinated with... What was I talking about before?
Your girlfriend's character. Or your girlfriend's...
Oh, yeah. Devin is fascinated with, like, puzzles and stuff.
Puzzles.
She loves puzzles and she loves playing spells.
I heard, like, it was a... Did he say muzzles? Did he say muscles?
Caution, this podcast is not safe for work. One of the Pathfinder characters I played, a magical short sword. Dude, I love Shalendor. I love magic weapons, and something in this adventure, I have put a ton of homebrew monsters and homebrew magic items in here, including what I think of as sort of my Elven Excalibur. It's like a legendary weapon that gets more powerful as you level up. Right now, this is just the baby version. If you want to see what it turns into later, keep in touch on my Patreon and DM's Guild. Look out for DM Guru 2 on TikTok to see the sequel adventure to this, Necropolis of Despair.
How many new monsters did you come up with?
How many new monsters? That's a really good question. And I bet you my editor knows that. I do. They were incredible. I really got to quickly shout out Maro, Brandon, Kevin, Nate, Carson, Veronica, Sam, Mark, Devin, everybody who contributed to this adventure. I basically owe you a Wookiee life debt. And I'm not messing around because without them, this never would have gotten done in time. And it was really important to me that it got done by today, and it did, and I'm so proud of it. I really, at the very least, if every single person on the planet hated this adventure, I would still be happy because this is my new favorite adventure, and I say that completely with just like passion. Like this is the adventure I want to run. So new monsters. There's sort of like some of them are minor homebrew changes. Like my Brood Guard just has less hit points, I think, and then like one variant ability. But let's take a look. We've got Andar, the Dungeon Master, who is a Yuan-Ti Malazan, sort of like inspired by King from Tekken. A Blood of Yargoth cult fanatic who is very similar to like a normal cult fanatic, but has some new spells. A corrupted guild thief who has like some higher perception. A dire squirrel, which I'm super excited about. Growing up in Maine, I see squirrels the size of cats, and I was like, what if there was a dire squirrel that was basically as dangerous as a panther?
Yo, true story. In AD&D, one of the most brutal encounters I barely survived was in a dark forest, and we may have ended up fleeing, but in a dark forest during the night, we were attacked by flying squirrels.
What?
And like we're rolling around on the ground trying to crush them off our bodies, and
dude, that happened to us in the Caves of Chaos with Sturges, and in terms of like nighttime near-death beast encounters, when we were playing Caves of Chaos, we found the crazy old hermit in the woods, and he offered us his poisoned food, and ever since I've never trusted any old like crazy old people in D&D, I assume, want to poison me ever since then.
Yeah.
And he had a pet mountain lion that just lived nearby, and that mountain lion almost killed my fighter. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Like, so that's something else in this game. I put a lot of like beasts that can just talk, because I think that's funny. I just think it's like more interesting. And also, who else is in here? There's Erraldor, the wizard thief, who is the guild master of the local thieves guild. I did a custom goblin warrior who's a little bit more tanky, and a custom goblin archer, sort of designed to be more support from the back. So like if they miss an attack, they get covering fire, so that friendly creatures have advantage against that target. It's basically like a mark, so that even if they miss, something happens.
Oh, cool.
I created a Goliath Stormfist Shaman. Some of these are just renamed. I renamed like a Yuan-Ti Pure Blood, just as like a Pure Blood Immortal, and I gave them like armor and weapons to make them seem like the Persian immortals with these like mysterious assassins. And then my biggest homebrew is absolutely King Talash, the Worldbreaker, who is the boss of this dungeon. He is a half-orc Yuan-Ti Malazan with giant pythons for arms, and he is a 5th level barbarian and 3rd level monk, and he has magic items and reactions and legendary actions and layer actions. And the goal for Talash was to give the dungeon master a boss that had so many tools that you would never have to worry about needing to up power him if the players are doing too well. You would only have to worry about not using stuff. And hopefully it is scattered enough with, enough limited information that you are not, overwhelmed with stuff, because there's only so many actions he can take. There's only so many bonus actions, but there should never be a moment where you don't have something you can do with the boss, because that, to me, that is the key to a good boss fight. So that's my biggest homebrew. If I had to take credit for one real homebrew that I'm like, this is my 100% homegrown baby boy, it's King Talash, the Worldbreaker. And I'm really excited to use him to kill people.
Real quick, I just want to say, folks, like, go to the links in the description and go download this.
Thanks, man. Oh, man.
Well, look, I'm glancing at it right now. It's kind of beefy, 54 pages. You're giving it away for free.
Yep.
I don't know if you should do that.
This is what I'm going to say. I'll put my flag in the ground on this. There is no other free adventure from an independent publisher on the internet better than this adventure. That's what I'd say.
And I'm really digging all the little like art and illustrations in there. It's really well done. I'm not usually a fan of black and white art, but these pop. These look really good. Yeah,
that was sort of a necessity of just scheduling. It was like, I want to put art in this, and I think I can make the black and white work. And if it worked for Gary, it can. I'm certainly not above what worked for Gary.
Yeah.
So I will take that, and I sort of use that as a standard, because something that I really love, and if people are still watching this, and I really hope you are, if you haven't watched The Eye of the Beholder on Amazon Prime Video, it is a documentary about the history of D&D and its art. Go watch it now, because you will learn about how bare bones and indie D&D was, and it is very encouraging when you're making your own stuff. Like this whole game has always been making stuff. I think one of the things I really want to see D&D TikTok explore more is sharing stuff like this. I kind of want to set a challenge, like build dungeons. I want us to be sharing dungeons more, because one thing I hear a lot that sort of discourages me is a lot of people say that in their homebrew they don't use a lot of dungeons. They just don't make them, and they don't use them. And I'm like, dude, the dungeon is like my favorite part of the game. Like, it's half the title. And I can't guarantee there's going to be a dragon in every adventure I run, but you can be, sure as heck that I'm going to make sure there's a dungeon in there.
That was one of our recent videos. Where have all the dungeons gone?
Yeah, I think every dungeon master worth their salt should at least have a, single level of 5-room dungeon that is theirs, that is sort of like their attempt. Because I think anytime I've ever seen a player go into becoming a DM, they become a better player. Because they go, oh my God, this is crazy. It's so easy to take for granted how much is going on behind the screen. And once you start building a dungeon, you start having a much greater and more well-rounded appreciation for every aspect of the game.
For sure. So we are just past the hour mark.
Well, man, we have to do this again. I know this is my first time at bat. I'm super, I can't tell you how excited I am that you like the adventure just at first glance. I really hope that if you and all the other nerd archivists just want to take a look at it and provide feedback, I am really excited to have DMs Guild, really host my thing. I hope it does well and gets a lot of traction, because I just want people to run it. I would say, I will love this adventure, and I'm going to run it next. I'm thinking about running the next time I run this for all the artists that worked on the game. And just because they know the game, but that means I'm going to have to change stuff. I won't be able to just stick to the script, which will be a good challenge. But anyway.
You'll be able to do some alternative bonuses over on your Patreon.
Yeah, but D&D, if we have to sign off for now, something that I do think is really important is how important D&D is to me, and how much that classic starting adventure meant to me, and how much it changed everything that I did in my life to sort of chase game design. And so if my adventure becomes someone's first adventure they tried DMing, my hope is that it makes it easier and more fun, and that you like it. And that's a huge honor to me. And if someone gets to play their very first time playing D&D is Shadows Under a Mestral, then I can die having done my work. That would absolutely, if nothing else, if I became a beggar tomorrow, I would gladly smile for the rest of my days knowing that someone's first adventure was Shadows Under a Mestral. So if and nothing else, just download it. It's totally free. I am absolutely willing to just shell out money and just give this to everybody, because I want it to be out there.
Well, cool, man. Hey, thanks for contributing to the community. It has been great chatting with you.
It's been an honor, sir. Thank you.
And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.